been with us today. She's got an IT problem she's sorting out. Is Naomi with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Naomi. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm okay.
Good. Shall we kick off then? And Nick, if you'd like to start the recording. You have? Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well. I understand that you've had a bit of rain there in the UK. I'm still here as for several weeks in Chicago, so it's 6 o'clock in the morning for me. Been up since 3, and I've just realised now I've switched on the camera that I look like I've been up since 3. Being a bit rough. Right. Okay. We'll get used to it. Right. So, can I introduce my panel? We have Gareth. Hi, Gareth.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Still morning for me. Morning's fine. We have Liz. Hi, Liz. How are you doing?
Hi.
We have Naomi. Hi, Naomi.
Hi, everyone.
And we have Kevin. How are you doing, Kevin?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Have you been volunteering for the weekend?
No, I was off this weekend doing some work, HMRC returns.
Well, that doesn't sound as interesting as your.
I think that was volunteering in a way.
Right, okay. We haven't done the stats for a couple of weeks, so I'll just very quickly pull up the stats to see what they look like. This is the CTR. Remember, these are applications. They are not caseload. So we can see that the numbers are starting to drop now for the working age claimants, but they remain steady for pension age. So no real great surprises in those stats. We can have a quick look at the number of calculations that are going on. They seem to be holding fairly steady. So there's still people making applications, even though they're not getting all the way through across both
benefits.
So there's still a requirement out there. Okay, should we do the business rates update then, Kevin?
It'll be very brief today, Malcolm. Business grants, the restart grant, you've got until Friday to actually pay those, because you have till the 31st of July to actually pay those restart grants. Your additional restrictions discretionary grant, you have until the 31st of March 2022. We hope to be making our last payments today, and hopefully that will be the end of paying grants. I'd say it's not going to be the end of grants itself, because there's going to be a lot of monitoring going on for a very long period of time because of the amount of money that's been spent. On expanded retail discount, the 66% we've made businesses apply. It's quite interesting that a lot haven't applied, which is quite interesting. So we're following that up. We've only had about 30% of those that got it last year apply. On the MCC reliefs, the COVID reliefs, obviously the legislation is only in stage 2 at the report stage. The government is now in recess, so that isn't going to be back on the agenda at all until the government comes back. That's likely to be autumn, winter, and therefore you've got to do your own discretionary scheme, and that will probably take some time to do. So you may well be enforcing business rates as we are doing, and you may then give them relief later on. So just bear that in mind. Apart from that, I've got nothing else from a business rates point of view, apart from just saying it's as busy as ever.
Okay, and in general terms for both council tax and business rates, how are the court dates going?
I think that's obviously for my colleagues, they'd have to comment themselves, because it's very much done on a local basis. We've got courts, we've had courts on a monthly basis. They've been working quite well. And we were there. We got 1,200 liability orders last week. So ours have been working very well. I think we're about the 3rd or 4th this year now. We had one last year where we actually were quite successful in December, but some authorities I've been having issues in their own local areas, but I think most are coming back now, and my colleagues will tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Right, thank you very much. If anybody else has got anything to say on that subject, if you want to raise your hand, then we'll open up the lines. Naomi, do you have anything to add to what Kevin's just said?
No, but regarding the recovery action, yeah, we're really starting to get back into business as usual. We've got a series of courts set up over the next sort of few months. I've mentioned before, we had problems in that our Cambridge court has stopped. So that's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, the courts are a bit of a mixed bag, aren't they, across the country? Okay, thank you both very much. I've chosen this report that came out last week from Big Brother Watch. It's caused some controversy in terms of debates across places like LinkedIn, the kind of reactions I would expect. And also, I don't think that many people have actually read the report either. So the media also kind of misreported what was said. So it was called Poverty Panopticon because it was looking at what it describes as the hidden algorithms used for benign processing for the administration of the welfare state. And it's very critical of several systems, many of those being used by local authorities here today. But I'd like to really sort of discuss the broad recommendations and not the individual examples. So I thought there were a number of quite interesting points that were raised about processing. Some of these are quite old and been going on for some time. Gareth, did you read this report by any chance?
I scanned the summary. The bit that I think grabbed my attention was the use of age as an element within the algorithms and the fact that that might be discriminatory.
Yeah, so there were a number of quite curious things in the report like that, which didn't really sort of indicate that they quite understood what data was being used for. But I thought some of the other stuff in there was quite important. But presumably you found that a bit of a mystery about the age.
Well, I can see that it could be discriminatory, and I can see that it's also absolutely sensible. So
yes,
there.
Yeah, so I think it came down to, so I've tried to dilute this down. So they made quite a lot of comments, but fundamentally it came down to this. They were very concerned about the lack of consent in terms of the use of data. So some of the big data exercises where an awful lot of data is being used, there was no consent. And there's a big debate about whether there should be consent. But that kind of linked to the other thing, which was that there was too much reliance on powers. So local authorities were claiming powers for the processing of data that was collected for other purposes, which has always been a tricky one. Their argument is a lot of this hasn't got a proven justification for using the data collected. And that seemed to have been the argument. So, for example, they do quite a lot around the prevention of homelessness regs being used wholesale for the use of sheebie. I mean, panel, do you have any comments about that side of things?
Malcolm,
Yes.
just before you go to the panel, John's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Mr. Gibbs would like to speak. If you want to come in, John.
Yeah. Bring John
Yeah,
in.
thanks. Just very briefly, in that report, it noted that Civica was a provider of RBV software, and I'd just like to categorically deny that. We do not produce RBV software. We, like Capita and Northgate, have a facility to bring RBV outcomes results into the system. But we are not a Centura or Trends Credit Union.
Yeah.
So just to put that straight.
Okay,
you.
that's fine, John. I wasn't going to mention any companies that may-
No, but other
Some-
people will have
someone
read
has
the
hand
report.
up.
Yeah.
Lynn has got a hand up.
Yeah, okay. Lynn, go on.
There's a surprise.
Yeah. I really didn't want to get into the defensive areas.
No, I'm not being defensive at all. I'm just saying that age as a protected characteristic has been a long debated question. When you think of everything that we do in Revs and Bens is working age or pensioner age, you know, your saga holidays and all of that, everything has got some link to age somewhere. So that's my only comment.
No, that's fine, Lynn. And I think actually, if we'll put the age one to bed. I think it was a prime example of where they don't really quite understand exactly what it is that local authorities are using the data for. And I think that, for me, in the report, that was sort of evidenced a bit by the local authorities not seeming to be able to explain to them what it is that they were doing either, which was one of the big criticisms.
Everybody's just been muted, including you, Malcolm.
Yeah, Malcolm, you've
Yeah,
got up.
Oh, you are.
Malcolm, you muted. Don't know what's happened.
Sorry, somebody must have muted me, Nick, because
All right.
couldn't.
Wasn't me. Who did it?
And
Hands
now
up if you did it.
saying
Liz,
can't
or Andy?
do anything at all. Yeah. Can everybody else hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay, right. Well, I kind of lost where I was on that.
You started off saying about the putting the age thing to bed.
Yeah, so to just put the age thing to bed, I think it's a prime example that one of the things that the report kind of indicated to me was that they didn't quite grasp exactly what all these exercises were for. And there was quite a mishmash of different types of systems it was kind of looking at. But also, it did seem to me as though because they used freedom of information, the local authorities themselves were unable to explain exactly what it was that they were doing as well, which kind of gave much more credence to some of these comments, which is, you know, where is the justification? Has that justification been made for using data that's collected for one purpose in terms of an exercise for another purpose? And so it was, you know, they were kind of really kind of making that point. I guess that's really what I was asking you guys. I mean, do you think, and Liz, you've done a number of these exercises, do you think that justification is made?
Actually, I think you're right, Malcolm. I mean, if they've been in touch with a lot of local authorities, I think a lot of them would be hard pressed to actually say how and why it works. I remember doing a freedom of information myself about, actually it was to do with ethnicity and the ethnicity information that's collected and who it was collected by, because it was actually part of a data set and part of, as we're not mentioning any names, part of RBV. And it was extraordinarily hard to come to any conclusion. And that was working with the provider of the data in the first place. You know, I mean, I can't say that, I mean, you can't really argue with them. I agree with you completely that I don't think the report missed a lot of a lot of stuff. Also, it sort of gave the impression that this was something new, and we know that this has been going on for about 10 years or more.
Something I would say longer than that, because
Oh, yes, that's true. Time
data
goes so
I
quickly.
think, yeah, I think one of the concerns, and it's certainly a concern that I share, is about the way in which its findings are applied, in terms of whether it's kind of reactive or proactive. And the problem, I think, seems to be widely considered to be the fact that the output is used to delay making an award, rather than being used to kind of retrospectively check on the validity of an award.
Yes, and I think that's quite important, isn't it, Gareth? Because that in the report it kind of implies it as a criticism of the system, but actually it's really a criticism of the process, which is also the report I don't think managed to differentiate between. But yeah, absolutely. So but I mean, I also had some concerns about taking large amounts of data on a regular basis, and that only producing small amounts of results. In other words, the justification for doing it, under local authority powers to do it, but actually the results for processing 27,000 households to only produce 25 results isn't really justified to do that.
And I think, in a sense, that's a kind of a commercial decision of the government, in a way, isn't it? The kind of encouragement to not unreasonably, but disproportionately put effort into this kind of area. Let's not put into things like encouraging take-up.
Yes, because I mean, certainly in the old days, we did much more around using data matching in order to target take-up, didn't we? And take-up campaigns, rather than knocking on people's doors and saying to them, "Hello, we understand you're poor," which is it's quite different. We did plan those, didn't we, together, Liz?
Yes, I must admit, I always think there is an element, if you were just looking at as somebody outside of working for a local authority, in other words, our customers, how do you actually contact people without giving them that thing about, well, we'd be looking at you, and as you say, we reckon you're not going to be able to pay your rent in 2 months' time. You're poor. We think you're in danger of reneging on some of your responsibilities towards us, which, let's face it, basically that's what is the most concern. There is an element of Big Brother about it, though, isn't there, really?
Yeah, and it's Naomi, it's getting the balance right, isn't it?
It definitely is. Yes, there is an awful lot of data that we collect, and sometimes having a small output is there for a good reason and could be a valid exercise if to prove that what you're doing is helping or working. Yeah, I think knocking on someone's door and saying, well, we've looked at your benefit claim, we've looked at how much council tax you owe us and how much rent, and we think that you need some of our help, is very wrong. Does put people on the back foot and does harbour this Big Brother appearance. But being able to look at where you've got rent arrears and where you've got arrears of council tax for certain types of benefit claimants will inform local authorities about making advice available, putting stuff in their tenant magazines, putting something on Twitter. So I think that is useful and reasonable at that level.
And that's a good justification, isn't it, Naomi? But I mean, it is, I guess, probably. And again, it kind of highlights where we are. If local authorities can't say that through those freedom of information requests, here is the justification for doing it. We believe that that is proportionate and reasonable. And actually, there's a bit of a political problem lurking around the edges of all of this. big data stuff, isn't there? And automation.
There's a commercial problem as well, I think. And I'm sure it doesn't apply in any of these actual cases, but I have come across advice software or information software that actually doesn't do anything, but from the point of view of kind of the commercial companies producing it, generates quite nice sales and quite nice profits, and they deliberately hide the fact that there's very little kind of concrete within the kind of impressive wrapper. And what worries me slightly about kind of that is the fact that if people start saying, well, we can't tell you exactly what we're doing and how we do it because of the fact that that's commercially confidential, then that opens up that kind of opportunity for people.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who came in late, we're talking about Poverty Panopticon from Big Brother Watch, which came out last week. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right there, Gareth. That kind of also highlighted, I thought, in the report, this whole question about the commercial protections of IPs versus GDPR and the rights of citizens. I thought that was kind of, there was no resolution in any of the report to those conflicts, which those conflicts must exist. I mean, I think we probably all, many of us on here who are, work for IT companies, that's always a conflict, isn't it? Kevin, you're a user of these kind of services. You've been quiet there. I'd like to hear your comments.
I don't know really what to say in respect to that, because I think we've been firefighting rather than proactively working over the last period of time. But yes, I have used these services, and probably they produce mixed results, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, one of the comments that I think was pretty critical was the lack of impact assessments to check for bias, false positives, or accuracy. So there was too much reliance on computer accurately saying yes or no, or you're at risk, or you are at risk. Do you think that's an area that local authorities will have to work on more?
I think we're always going to be challenged on what information we use, and we seem to be very cautious in local government over what we can use and what we can't use. Some authorities more than others, to be fair. And people will always try and challenge us, I think, particularly if we are successful and we get through to people that are trying to probably avoid paying something.
I think there's a really, really big technical problem of putting my kind of information scientist hat on this one. Generating a kind of proper, probably synthetic data set to test those assessments would be a huge task. Actually generating, data that would be quantifiably accurate, and then testing it against the different sort of applications. Clearly, you'd want a common data set that you then used to test all of the different applications against in order to assess their effectiveness. And I think that would be, an enormous task beyond the resources probably of most IT companies.
Yeah, that kind of ties in with another report that or certainly a statement that came out of the Department for Work and Pensions today, which they said that they cannot tell what the impacts are going to be on the reduction of the £20 in universal credit.
Well, they said last week that it was not in the public interest to reveal the work that they'd done on that.
Yes. Yes, I mean, exactly. And in some ways, is that not the argument that perhaps local authorities would put up in terms of exposing how they're processing processing these things. You know,
No.
it's not in the public interest. Liz, go on.
I just said no, Malcolm. That's all.
No, they.
No, well, I mean, is it an argument that could be made? Is it not in the public interest? I mean, let's face it, most of us think that the fact that the government are sitting on a report into the stopping the increase, or whether the increase is, it's in the public interest. You know, I mean, I'm sorry, but it is. I mean, the reason they're sitting on it is probably because they want to, not because it's not in the public interest. No. How open are we going to be? I mean, I know this. I mean, why on earth they chose such a ridiculously pompous title for this, I don't know. But really, when you look at it, their basic conclusion is, well, get rid of all of it. You know, whether it's useful or not, just get rid of it, or whether you're using it correctly, or whether you have any, you know, whether you have any data to back up what you're doing and why you're doing it. I mean, we all know why most of us moved into RVB because, well, RVB in relation to, shall we say, benefit processing. It did make a difference if it was used properly. But as somebody said earlier, one of the panelists said, you know, if you just go down to relying upon, well, actually, this is low risk, so I'm not going to take any notice of it. And things just go through on the nod, then that's not the way to deal with it. But that's all down to the policies that you have backing up your risk-based verification. I've wandered off topic slightly, but I do feel quite strongly about that it isn't just a case of, I mean, decisions are made by local authority officers and should be, not by the machine, but in most cases, they're not. Because the policies are not there to back it up.
Yeah, I think that is the point, is it not? That in some ways, I mean, you would expect Big Brother Watch to want to burn all of this stuff, because that's what, you know, that's what sits at the heart of Big Brother Watch.
You know anything about Big Brother Watch?
I mean, yes, I mean, I've had plenty of contact with Big Brother Watch.
No, but I mean about their, you know, their origins and.
Yeah, I mean, funding. Yeah, I mean, largely they grow out of the CCTV work that local authorities were
but
doing.
Also founded by the same person who founded the Taxpayers Alliance.
Yes, yeah. So it's
how they financed. You know, yes, I mean, you talk about transparency. Sorry, yes. I'm attacking Malcolm. The attacker now.
Sorry, Liz. Malcolm, Naomi's patiently got a hand up there for a few minutes.
Yeah.
I'll put an interest in here. I'm a big fan of RBV personally. We've used RBV for many years. Our officers are empowered that they can change that risk score at the point that they come to do an assessment. We don't do a fully automated process from receipt of claim to paying. There is always an officer at some point during that process. We have done some over the years, some analysis. Broadly speaking, it works. Those with a low risk, when we've done a review, they've not found any large overpayments. The medium risks, there have been a few more there. So I actually do like RBV. I don't know how long it's going to be necessary for with the reduction in housing benefit and you know, the verification framework thus far, because our CTR has moved away from that level of verification.
And I think that's, again, I mean, I think this as I was trying to get a word in with Liz, I mean, I think the thing about this is that what you've done is you've just explained something which is benign and useful. And I've always thought RBV is benign and useful. But what you're doing is you're constantly checking it, you know, and making certain that it still works, and you have human intervention. And I think that was one of the points, really, that this report kind of makes, and I think local authorities generally probably do it, but were unable to articulate that they are doing it, which it was around the fact that it isn't just left. A computer says yes or no, or you are at risk, or we're going and knocking on doors. So the question for me is much more is how do we make certain that the processes are in place to be able to defend the use of this kind of work? And that seemed to me to be the issue that I had with the report, is the justification wasn't made other than sort of borrowing justification in LinkedIn. I mean, anybody could please refute what I've just said. Because certainly at Cambridge, you are doing this, aren't you?
I mean,
I
I'd
think
like.
Liz might want to say something. Malcolm.
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Naomi, for obvious reasons. But especially as I was there when it was introduced.
Yeah.
But no, I just wanted to say that, you know, there's always been that exemption within data protection and GDPR that doing things for the social and economic good are valid reasons to use data for good reasons. That was my only point.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you are right, I think the key thing is that exemptions, etc., exist, and I know from a long career of working, particularly, you know, back in the days when I worked in fraud, is there's often a temptation to think that the exemption existing is enough, and you don't have to justify why the exemption applies. And that seems to me to be the big message that came out of this report, is the justification for doing stuff wasn't being articulated by the local authorities. And that could just simply be because freedom of information officers are acting as a filter, and therefore that justification isn't going through. But equally, I'm not seeing an awful lot of impact assessments being attached to these things when they go to committees to be approved by members.
I mean, we've just been going through a process of, for example, introducing breathing space here at Xantura. And I know that all of the authorities have done a DPIA, you know, a data protection impact assessment, as parcel of the onboarding process. So I wasn't just commenting about RBV, it was a much wider, a bit like Naomi said earlier about what appeared to be about a single view of GET and using that sort of information to establish vulnerability.
Yeah.
Malcolm, Liz is waiting with a hand up now.
Yes, go on.
You need to unmute yourself, Liz. You need to unmute yourself, Liz.
Do that. Kept happening to me last week as well. What I was saying was, just very quickly, I am a fan of RVB2. I think it made a huge difference to benefit processing, and used correctly, as clearly it is being used at Cambridge, is fine. But I do agree with Malcolm about when you are actually renewing your RVB policy on a yearly basis and it goes to council committee, whatever, there's very little, there's not a lot of impact assessment that goes with it.
Yeah, okay. Kevin, do you want the last word on this?
I personally don't think I can add much to what has already been said. I think RBV has its uses, but data is only as good as the data you're given, and doesn't always produce the results you actually do, and then produces a whole range of other issues as well. At the end of the day, there's nothing like local knowledge and information to find out about cases and everything else. And be interesting to see what the results are at the end of all this. I think that was proven by the fact of doing the grants. We found out so much information about businesses and local businesses and business rates. So, so that was because people wanted something and wanted to contact us. At the end of the day, I don't think anything will beat that.
Yeah.
I think Naomi might have the last word on it, Malcolm.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Kevin. I don't know if you're alluding to the HBAA. The national risk score is producing very low results for Cambridge. VEP is higher than that. And when I've trawled back and had a look at our own interventions over the years, can't even touch it. Local knowledge is key.
Okay, on that basis, I'm going to call this session to a close. We'll talk a bit about hybrid working next week. Can I thank very much my panel? You've all been very active today. Thank you very much, Naomi. And thank you very much, Liz. And you too, Kevin, and you too, Gareth. And I'll see you all next week. I'll try and have a shave for next week, I think.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.